Dear viewers, welcome to today's episode of Beyond Politics. I am your host, Mahmoud Yunus. Today we will be discussing the topic of governance in mixed or plural societies. Our guest for today is Dr. Imad Salamey. Dr. Salamey is Associate Professor at the Lebanese American University, and he's one of the few people who have researched such topics, especially in the context of Lebanon, which is actually a topic, a context which is bound to be very relevant much more broadly. You're most welcome with us today.
Thank you, Mahmoud. For
there are so many recipes for a system of governance in societies which are mixed, partly because mixed societies are mixed on different terms. So how do you suggest we start by tackling the topic?
Yeah, you know, for a long time, political thinkers have been trying to figure out what kind of government to have in a society that is deeply divided. We've been hearing a lot lately about democracy, what it means and how it can be applied. And as you know, democracy is originated from the Greek word of the rule of the people.
Yes.
So how can we make the rule of the people a reality in a government?
Yeah. In a despotic system, it's not a problem whether the society is diverse or not.
Exactly.
Apparently.
I mean, if you had all the people the same in a society, they have the same religion, the same culture, the same language. They don't have a serious ethnic or religious or identity division among themselves. Then it's easy to say, okay, you people in this country, let's have you vote which president, which government you want, and we will translate your votes into power. Whoever wins the majority of the votes in this country will become the rulers.
Yes.
If two or three party coalitions established and won the majority of the people, they form a government, then a minority will oppose. This is a pure democracy.
Then this is the way of producing minorities only on basis of politics.
Political minority.
Don't you think that we have a clearer vision of diversities now, in the sense that there has been a trend of locating different elements to diversify people, according to which, say, people now are diverse based on so many issues. And this seems to be a continuing trend.
I mean, now when with globalization, you know, as the world becoming smaller, people are seeing one another in a clearer vision.
True.
They are becoming to know one another. In the past, people used to live in their towns, in rural areas, in remote geographic locations. No one know each other much. But now we're in a globalized world. We're seeing the differences as well as the commons. But this is what I was saying, you know, as political thinkers try to figure out which political system to establish, they're now realizing that societies are not as homogeneous as they thought or assumed before. Exactly. On the contrary, every society is made out of different groups. And these groups may differ ethnically, they differ religiously, they differ culturally, linguistically, and yet they are to live with one another under the same government, under the same parliament, under the same court, under the same rule of law, same constitution. So how can we bring all these people of different backgrounds into living as one people and translate their political will in a democracy in a form of government? Here became the issue for political thinkers. Of course, we realized as we developed in time that sometimes we need to have a country under a federal order.
Yes.
This is particularly feasible when the country is divided on
based
regional
on
geographical division. Yani, in other words, if we have a group in the south of speaking French, their group are French culturally or French speakers, in the north are German speakers,
True.
like we have the case in Belgium and Switzerland, then we could say, okay, let's have a federal order.
Yes.
Okay, we have two states. Each state on its own has its own government and so forth, and together will form a federal association, whereby this federal association make them work in collaborative order because they have common interest, let's say economic common interest, let's say they have even defense interest to support one another, to protect
Let
themselves.
me elaborate on this issue a little bit, because I mean, to discuss democracy, whether majoritarian or other forms, is not our main concern here. But what would make the case for having these coalitions? Wouldn't be people happier in their smaller entities living alone, like in Liechtenstein, for instance? Why would people would like to have these large confederations?
Yeah, I mean, look at the United States, for example, today. Okay, United States is made out of 50 states.
51, right?
No, 50 states.
Okay.
Sometimes
you would know better,
we assume other countries that are very closely linked to the United States as the 51st. But no, United States made out of 50 states. Each state has its own Congress, each state has its own governor, each state has its local council, each state has its own constitution, believe it or not. Now, why these states don't become independent on their own? Why? Simple. These 50 states, they figured out that together they can become an economic and military superpower in the world. They can, through their collaborations and cooperations, they can produce so much, they can sell to other countries, and they can gain wealth and power.
Isn't this a bit idealistic in the sense that people figure out the system that, isn't it a historical contingent fact that one state or one leader is more powerful and he brings in other states and he makes a confederation?
You know, sometimes it does. I mean, throughout the course of history, one group of states may overwhelm other states and force them into the federation.
Okay.
I mean, things like this happen. The thing is that federation is a form of political association that empowers all the parts who have their own special, and they have their special differences, and they cannot become one state. Now, and that brings us here to Lebanon. Lebanon is neither an ideological democracy where a majority rule and the minority opposes, because we have differences, and these differences are historic, very deeply historic. When we talk about the different sectarian groups in Lebanon, we're talking about a history where each sectarian group at one time was oppressed, either in a neighboring country or and they sought refuge in Lebanon. I mean, a very recent minority that became part of the Lebanese fabric are the Armenians. Before, I mean, one can trace back different groups. The Druze, sought to refuge in the mountains of the Shuf Mountains, fleeing other civilizations that came across. The Christians at one time, some of the Orthodox Christians came in the past from Syria.
At several stages.
So the communities in Lebanon, the sectarian communities in Lebanon, have a history of repression, and they are very alerted about being repressed again. They want to maintain their own autonomy. They have their own cultural tradition, religions, and so forth, and they want to make sure that this is well preserved.
It's a unique situation in a sense because there's no majorities. There's a
combination exactly. We don't have a majority.
But there's also another factor that the difference here is religious. Is there anything about the religious difference? Like, say, in Germany, you have the different confederations based on perhaps Catholic, Protestant distinction. But they live well. But it seems to me that the religious difference is much more unique than the linguistic or the ethnic, or
That's right.
especially today.
Lebanon's communities, sectarian communities, combine various aspects in their political expressions. They're not just a community in the sense that they live in a geographic area from certain region, but they also combine in their respective mobilizations a religious identity, political identity, and even cultural identity that they
an affiliation
bring with them.
True.
So I mean, even in Lebanon, when you have a group of Lebanese coming from the south, let's say, they identify the same group. They're coming to Beirut, let's say, to the capital city. They identify one another by their last name. They identify each other by their
Accent.
First name, even sometimes, you know, if they're Shiites, Hassan, Hussein, Ali. If they're the north, the same thing. They identify themselves from which village they're coming from. They identify themselves from, you know, the sect, okay? Even the differences within the sect, you know, which sectarian affiliation, marja'iyya and so forth they belong to. And eventually, this creates a strong solidarity. And therefore, when you try to bring these different groups together under one political system, you come out with groups who have different political and cultural and religious, so it is interconnected political identity, and it expands beyond just a matter of religious belief, the way sometimes it is
this is something actually Lebanon presents a unique case, but it's a case that can be generalized, and I guess it would be relevant for what's going on in the region, maybe for Iraq, perhaps Egypt. But let's break, and then we go on discussing this after the break. We'll return in a minute.
Pollution and climate change, medicine manipulation, genetically modified food, the destruction of wildlife, and corporate exploitation. These are all part of a new terrorism threatening our future.
Eco-terrorism, global awakening to a world under threat.
Welcome back. This is our second section of today's interview of Beyond Politics. Our guest, Imad Salamey, Dr. Imad Salamey, was actually started discussing the Lebanese model. Talk about models is very rampant nowadays in this region, and it seems to be that so many models are collapsing. And these are times of crises, so I guess what we're discussing would seem to be very relevant. You told us that there are so many grounds according to which people become different, and then they have to bring these differences to the question of what's the best form of governance or how to live together. What makes the Lebanese situation important, do you think, today?
Yes, as I was saying, that when you try to bring people to live by a form of government, it depends on their backgrounds, on nature of society. It could be a democracy, a pure ideological debate, majority rule, minority oppose, or it could be a federal, like what we said about the United States, because you know each group is separated by region. And
each set of values has its distinct
and then
geography.
they collectively come together in order to form a economic or military association to make each one of them stronger. In the case of Lebanon, as I was saying, we have these distinctions historically and deep rooted separate identity formations,
which have their long history.
Long history.
Seems that we have a habit of bringing this history back every now and then.
I mean, there have been attempts to go beyond and form a Lebanese unified national identity. However, you know, like you was mentioning, Lebanon is part of the region as a whole, and it get to be influenced by the regional dynamic.
It lends itself to be influenced.
Itself to the
external
region.
influence. Yeah.
So, you know, it has not succeeded so far. I mean, there are efforts and there are movements, especially by secular parties in Lebanon.
Do they exist?
Nationalists, but they're very marginalized. They never really succeeded in bringing in real change to the country. Still, I mean, academicians, people who don't live much among reality, day by day reality.
That's the accusation.
They tend to be, you know, more idealistic in their perception of what is a Lebanese nationalism. However, I was going to say that in the case of Lebanon, we have these different identity groups living in the same country. And
all these markers.